Hi design cutters, my name is Joanna Fallon, I'm a graphic designer, and today we're going to be creating this fictional book cover using some of the elements from the world's greatest vintage collection by Vector Hut. Today we're going to be recreating this fictional book cover, which was created using a handful of the many resources included in the world's greatest vintage collection. Before we start working on the design though, let's take a quick look at what's actually included in the pack. You can see we're now on the Design Cuts product page for the world's greatest vintage collection, and it's just huge. There is so much in here, and to start with, there's over 1,000 vintage illustrations. These are all really high res, so huge size, lots of detail, all kinds of ephemera, paper textures which are always hugely versatile and useful in design work. You've got all these beautiful seamless textures as well, and each one comes in an inverted version of itself too. It also includes the Hamilton font family. In this one we've got a beautiful hand-drawn serif text. We've also got it in a really nice calligraphic script style, so those two work really well together. And a really nice feature of this is that it includes 12 hand-drawn botanical sketches by the creator's dad, and these are really lovely, and they kind of add a little bit more of a softer, delicate touch to the illustrations, which balance out some of the other illustrations which have come from the prints in books, which have got much harder outlines. You can see here that all the illustrations have been sourced from original materials and been painstakingly scanned at high res. And what's really useful is that all the backgrounds have been removed, so these images are all isolated, ready just to use in your designs. All the illustrations come in multiple formats. They come in vector versions and transparent PNGs, and the pack itself includes lots of useful tutorials and guides on how to get the most out of the artwork that's included. Also, a really useful feature in big packs like this is that they've all been categorized and really easily organized, so you can find what you need fairly quickly. You can see as I'm scrolling now the sheer volume and variety of the illustrations that are included, so you're going to find something that you need for your project. Got all these beautiful heraldry illustrations, lots of very cool anatomy illustrations as well. These really lovely animal illustrations. This bird here is a particular favourite. We'll probably be focusing mainly on the illustrations from this section, the flower illustrations, because the book is about a magic garden. Also got these really lovely kind of quirky, unique papers. And these vintage paper textures as well, which are really versatile and useful. A nice thing about this is that they come in original format, black and white, and transparent, so lots of ways you can use those. The seamless patterns that we saw before, and you can see more clearly here how each design has got kind of a reverse version of itself. Some really gorgeous designs here. You can see the font family's got 2 sets of scripts. It's got these stylistic alternatives, and it's got a serif version, and these really lovely flourishes which are included as well. It's also got these ink splashes which are really nice, really useful, and you can use those on so many things. And that's it. So you can see it's a huge resource. There's plenty in here that will keep you happily designing for the end of time, I can imagine. So let's get started on how we're going to use some of these resources. This is the design that we're going to be recreating. I'll talk a little bit about some of the techniques that we're using and why we're doing things a certain way, but a lot of this is going to be sped up mainly so you can see just how the resources are used. And if you go to the Design Cuts YouTube channel, you'll see lots of tutorials on how to create vintage designs as well, so you'll pick up a lot of tips and tricks there if you're not sure about how to do certain things, or if you want to learn more about the technical side of putting something like this together. We'll start, as we do with all designs, with a blank canvas, and we're going to give this book a background colour. And since it's a book about a magic garden, something that's green is probably a good idea. The next thing we're going to do is add a little bit of texture to the cover, and we're going to do that using one of the paper textures from the pack. This is paper texture number 9 in the black and white version, and what we'll do is just transform this to fit the canvas. What we're going to do is use this to create a screen texture. So we're going to reverse the colours, so I'm pressing Command I on a Mac. To keep the screen effect fairly subtle, we want to have this quite dark, so I'm going to increase the contrast and decrease the brightness. So then if we change the layer blend mode to screen, you can see the effect there has been that all the areas that are black kind of disappear, so you can see everything that's below it, whereas the white areas still are visible. This effect is still a bit more prominent than we'd like it to be, so I'm going to drop the opacity of that layer down to about quite a bit, actually, about 20%. So you can see there we've still got a little bit of texture, but not enough for it to be too distracting from the design itself. The next thing we're going to do is start adding the actual elements of the design, but the effect we're trying to create is that everything looks like it's got a gold sort of debossing on it. And to help create that effect, we're going to import a gold texture first and apply it to a group where we have all the illustrations, and that will allow us to see the elements with the gold effect already applied. So this is a free gold texture that I found online, and I'm going to just move that around so that it fits our canvas a little bit better. And I'm going to create a new folder, and that's where we're going to put all subsequent layers in. And we're going to apply this texture to all the elements within this folder only. And because there's nothing in the folder yet, the texture has disappeared. We're going to start by using the Hamilton serif typeface to create our book title. We're going to use one of the flourishes now to create a little sort of decorative divide between the two parts of the title. We're now going to use the Hamilton regular font, which is the script style, to write the author of our book. And you can see that works really nicely with the flourishes and the serif style text as well. Now this text looks a little bit faint, so it's quite a slim style, and we're going to use a little trick that you can do in Photoshop by adding like a false bold effect to it. You can see that's made the text a little bit sort of chunkier and easier to see. Now we have our title and author in place. You can see there's a little bit of space either side of the word magic, which we could maybe fill in with a decorative element, and we're going to do that using one of the patterns, but in a non-pattern way. We're going to be using pattern number 23, which has got this really lovely sun and stars motif. So let's just move that over to our design, and we're going to create a layer mask. Select the area that we want to keep. And I've just inverted the selection, so we're kind of selecting everything apart from the star, and going to fill that in with a black background to mask out everything else outside of that design. And then you can see we've got this lovely little isolated element that we can move around and use in our design. The next part of the design is to start adding all the gorgeous illustrative elements. We're going to start by adding one of the central elements, and I really like this bee, which is bee number 2 from Animals Volume 2. And he's on a bit of an angle, so we'll just move him around so he's a little straighter. We'll go through the placement of a couple more of the illustrations, but after that I'll speed this video up because it's essentially the same process that we're going to be going over of importing one of the graphics, resizing it, repositioning it, and doing the same with another one. The graphic that's just been imported is one called Floral Deco number 23. And I've just turned it round and placed it down here because it's quite a nice shape for framing this bottom corner. This design we've added is also part of the decorative illustrations folder, and what I'm going to do with this one is flip it and then turn it on its side. And the reason we've done that is if I adjust it slightly and zoom in, you can see this part of the design kind of echoes the shape of the bee quite nicely, and it's something to think about if you're working on a design that includes lots of different visual elements like this is, just to see where each image fits in relation to the other. So it's a bit like a jigsaw puzzle. You're just looking for what kind of outlines and shapes slot in next to each other. And this works quite nicely too, because you can see the curve of the title here. It's also slightly reflected in the curve that's going on there. That's our design completed, but we're going to add just a bit of a finishing touch by adding a kind of debossed effect to this, so it does look really like a gold foil print. We'll zoom in so you can see the effect a bit better, but also it gives you an idea of the sheer detail in some of these illustrations. You can see how lovely that looks, and if you just switch off the gold texture for a second, you can see how those illustrations will look normally. Now we're going to apply bevel and emboss texture to give it a debossed look. Let's just change the angle of the lighting. And there we have it. Thanks to these beautiful vintage resources, we've been able to create a pretty authentic looking vintage book cover. I have to admit I was so pleased when I heard that I was going to get to play with this pack, just because I love this style of illustration so much, and quite a few of my clients do have this kind of vintage style as part of their branding, and you just can't grow tired of this style. It's so beautiful and timeless. It's just a real treasure trove of design resources, and you'll probably be using elements from this pack forever, which I'm pretty sure I will be. The World's Greatest Vintage Collection by Vector Hut, now available on the Design Cuts marketplace.